Clouds.
Those aren't clouds, Daddy. Those are chemtrails.
Chemtrails? What are chemtrails?
Chemical trails, Daddy, and they're very bad.
Short intro on that one. This is Dane Wigington with GeoEngineeringWatch.org radio for the week of April 5th, 2014. Another week in the asylum. Everything unfolding in too many directions to even really try to comprehend. You know, the whole scenario is like with society right now, is like a giant cancer that is killing its host from every direction, and all the individual cells in that cancer seem all too willing to participate as long as they feel their own personal situation will be bettered by that participation, without any of the cancer really comprehending that this expansion or this continuation of the insane behavior is going to sink the entire ship, and that's exactly where we're headed. So the Weather Channel has gotten through almost the whole alphabet for its winter engineered snowstorms. They're now Z is the next storm if they can manage to get that one whipped up, and I'm sure that'll make a lot of headlines for them. And we're working on a couple things with that. In fact, there's an activist on my post that has decided to help try to get a billboard process going. I'm not sure if she wants me to mention her name on the air or not, so I won't, but she'll be posting on that soon, and we're trying to help her get this done, to start putting some billboards up in certain places. And Greg Palin, who we had on last week, and we'll have on again soon, Greg has done this already in the past. He's had billboards. I'm leading this into Weather Channel, as I just mentioned, because we want to put a billboard up on the freeway right outside their facility. So we're trying to put everybody together, and perhaps George Barnes might be a part of this as well, so we can put up a big geoengineering billboard outside the Weather Channel's headquarters in Atlanta, Georgia, because the spinelessness of the people in the scientific meteorological community and the science community as a whole is become absolutely incomprehensible, that they will say whatever they're told to say. And on that note, we'll have data posted soon in a multi-part article I'm working on now to disclose just how much money is going into paying these people to say what they say. In fact, with a pie chart that discloses everybody from the Koch brothers to others that we would expect in this scenario to pay people to say everything from Fukushima is not a problem, it's not dangerous, to the climate is cooling, to geoengineering isn't happening, to 9/11, same thing there. We saw scientists. How many scientists were paid on 9/11 to say that a 50-story steel high-rise building collapsed from a few chairs and couches burning on the first story? And how many people believe that? I mean, how many people to this day will call you a conspiracy theorist if you think there's something not right about a 50-story steel high-rise building collapsing at free fall speed because of a few chairs and desks burning in the first story. I mean, if that was the case, anybody who lights up a cigarette in a high-rise should scare the hell out of anybody else that's in the building, because the whole building might come down, right? And that's what kind of society we live in. It's absolutely ludicrous. It's insane. And in the meantime, the ecosystem implodes around us. I took a walk in the forest last night with my kids, and I've been so busy that I haven't had a chance to do that for a while. And you know, it's a mixed feeling walking out there. That yes, it's spring, everything's supposed to be green, but it's not. It's not. The forest is literally imploding. I live in an area that was 70 inches of rain annually. It's a rainforest. It's a boreal rainforest. And now, in areas where you didn't used to be able to see through one tree, let alone through a quarter mile of forest, the trees used to be full and lush, and now they're literally skeletons with a few needles left on them. Not much left, hardly anything sprouting, no birds, dead trees all over. It's really painful to walk through this forest. And then while you're walking through and trying to take this all in, of course, you hear aircraft going over, spraying what they're spraying. I woke up last night at 4 in the morning with an aircraft that was low enough to rattle the windows. I live in the middle of nowhere. I mean, this can't happen unless, you know, these guys are doing whatever they're doing up there. So it's tough. And how many people don't notice this? We'll discuss in a minute with Richard Sachs from Arizona, by the way, with us. We'll get his insight, and Russ Tanner, who's a huge and very steady help to this cause all the way around, but we'll get their perspectives. But I asked everybody in the audience to take a look at the trees wherever you live to see if they really look like they used to look, because they don't. And I don't care where you live. And maybe a lot of people don't notice it. You know, anything looks normal to some people, but the trees now here and everywhere else we've looked or have footage from Southeast Asia to Eastern Europe, they look gnarled. There's a lot of burnt bark. They don't have much foliage. They look sick. You know, you can look at somebody standing a quarter mile away and you might think they look okay. And you get up close, maybe they're on their deathbed. And that's about how the trees look. And again, very few birds. We don't see the geese flying over like we used to see. The type of shrub called the manzanita that is usually a food source for the animals in the forest, which we don't see much of anymore, by the way. Hardly any bears. I don't see bear scat, you know, bear droppings anywhere. So I have a big cactus that I planted some years ago, a big prickly pear cactus. Doesn't really belong in the rainforest, but it grew. And it sat there fine for many years, but now there's virtually nothing to eat. So I went down there, as I just mentioned, on this walk, and the cactus has been completely devoured. A bear ate the cactus. Since when do bears eat cactus? There's nothing else for them to eat. And yet you have a society trudging right along because, again, they can still pick up a burger at McDonald's and go to a movie, and everything seems fine. So we're virtually sleepwalking into total cataclysm, and yet society is still asleep at the switch. We have now a site to try to disclose some of the people that are helping to hide the insanity. We've talked about this before in the past, but it's going now, and thanks to Russ's help, we should have something up and running fairly soon, a site called Disinformation Directory. We want to expose and put a spotlight on people who lie for money, and there's lots of them, from David Keith to meteorologists, which we have some statements from them. We just got from an activist that are astounding, a meteorologist, a very well-known one, stating that we need to believe him because he has degrees, even a PhD. So he's the horse's mouth, and he says they're not spraying, and that's that. And that's, again, the kind of society we live in, where very few men have any spine at all, any morality, and certainly no honor. And we simply need to shine a light on these people, period. Put their email contacts there so the public at large can rattle their cage every day and make them know that we know they know this is going on, and that we know that they know they're lying. So the bottom line is trying to expose some of these people soon. And in regards to some things we see happening in the system that are further efforts to try to hide the contamination. We saw after Fukushima they raised the quote-unquote safe level of radiation, in some cases 10,000%. So now that's the new norm. That's the new safe. Radiation is now not a problem for you at very high levels. So that's how the establishment hide this. Too many people want to believe it. They don't want to come out of their cocoon. So we're seeing the same things now with lab tests across the board that are testing for heavy metals. In the case of national labs, which I just checked with last week, now their MDL, their minimum detection level, has been raised. It's 3,000% higher than what our local state lab does here in Northern California. So you have to have 3,000 times more aluminum in your rain test if you send it to national labs for them to even detect it than you would if you send it to our local lab. This is just one more means that the whole system is now showing, again, measurements in MGL, milligrams per liter, which is parts per million instead of parts per billion. So it's just very covert ways of trying to hide the contamination. So we see the whole system and all the people in it willing to cooperate, willing to go down with the ship because they somehow think they're immune to what's coming. So I hope everybody, again, continues to study the finer points of what's happening so they have a better comprehension of how fast the walls are closing in. Russ and Richard, guys, chime in. What on the trees and so forth. I want to bring this up because, again, it's like people don't even care about the natural environment anymore, even though there's very few birds. The trees aren't very foliated. The UV's burning the hell out of them. We're getting data now that there's complete ozone holes in places around the globe, and the scientists just can't figure it out because they just can't see the elephant in the room of geoengineering. What do you think about that? Either one of you guys.
Go ahead, Russ.
Well, it's par for the course. You know, I know that people profit from this, so it's all part of a much larger plan.
What about that? What do you think about a man, Russ, or any individual, man or woman, who will simply do anything asked of them if it's a good career decision? Anything, say anything, do anything. What do you think about?
Well, I think it makes them worthy to be part of the disinformation directory. I think that what we're doing needs to be done. They need to have a spotlight on them because what you said is exactly right. They're spineless and they are lacking any sort of morality. They're selling themselves out. And these are people who are in a position that could really make a difference, that could really sound an alarm, but they have chosen to sell out, and they're probably making some kind of profit or they're bowing down to a threat or something like that. So it's, you know, I mean, these are crime. We're talking about, on this radio show, we talk about crimes against humanity. And these people are all complicit with the largest crime against humanity in human history.
Richard, again, you know, the kind of people that, if you don't have it, people, I hear this kind of rationalization. Well, you have to eat, so you have to say whatever you're told to say. And I don't buy it. I'd rather starve. I would literally rather starve than be one of those people. I would. I left Bechtel Power for that reason. I left Bechtel Power when I was very young because the things I saw were not right. Plain and simply, they were not right. And I saw a lot of men that looked like they were formerly good men that now were not. Now that didn't think twice about stealing something or doing something that was clearly wrong in regard to the common good and things the company was supposed to be doing for the general public. I don't want to be around that. I mean, if that's what life's about, that's the wrong kind of life, period.
Yeah, I think people have gotten out of touch with their own sense of what is right, and everybody has that internally. You don't have to memorize it anywhere. I mean, if somebody asks you to commit some kind of atrocity and is going to pay you for it, in my opinion, there's always a voice inside yourself that warns you that this is not a good thing to do.
But that voice gets dimmer and dimmer over time with people if they're around it all the time, doesn't it? I mean, I witnessed this when I was with Bechtel. I saw over the course of several years that people who showed resistance to that at one point, they start to break down. It's normal. Everybody does it. I'm going to do it too. It's wrong.
Well, I think it's partly, like you say, it's peer pressure, and that people take their guidance too much from whatever everybody else does, and the whole group can descend very quickly into unconsciousness that way, just doing whatever they're paid and told to do. And I mean, the people that have committed mass murder all over the globe, mostly governments and now governments with corporations in partnership, are doing this stuff, and they don't have to do it themselves. They just have to organize it and hire people to do it and print the money to pay them to do it. And if the society were not willing to carry out these crimes, you know, for part of their job, most of this stuff would never happen. It wouldn't matter how many things were planned at the top level.
I was just going to bring that up to you, Richard. I mean, isn't it amazing, or both of you, wouldn't it be amazing to see what would happen if none of these people were complicit? There would be no power behind these programs.
Yeah, I think that's one reason, the biggest fear in what I've found of the people running all the terrible programs around the globe right now for basic enslavement and annihilation of humanity. Their biggest fear is that people will become conscious and wake up. And I think, all they can do about that is try to work as fast as they can for new life forms and robots and hope that they don't need human help as soon as possible, but they're not there yet.
Speaking of becoming conscious and waking up, Russ, can you give the call-in number for anybody who wants to call in and share their perspectives, what we're going over right now, or anything to do with this issue or the collective insanity?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. The number to call in is 718-717-8296. That's 718-717-8296, and I will put it in the chat room too for people to see it.
Thanks, Russ. The funding on some of this stuff, again, what we see, the central banks that fund everything, and when we have even people when their own reality is affected, like the state of California, where in 2010 is when I spoke in front of the Energy Commission there with their top scientists. They knew they were losing a lot of rain from, quote, particulates of unknown origin. But when it came down to it, no matter how much data they were presented with and no matter how much the state was being hurt, the bottom line is the state can't keep its doors open without 30, 40, 50 billion a year, billion with a B, from the Fed. It keeps everything afloat. Everything is connected to this matrix of central bank money. Everything.
Yeah, that was really a pretty brilliant plan to take over each country by offering to print the money and keep it non-political, so nothing bad would ever happen. And the fake congressman fell for that in this country in 1913 on Christmas Eve.
They did, and and now we have a system that's totally controlled and manipulated. And you see the effort that's gone to whenever anybody challenges that system. When Saddam Hussein decided that he was going to have an oil bourse and currency other than the dollar, immediately taken down. Same saber rattling with Iran. Gaddafi, when he was going to trade oil in something other than dollars, gone. It's that simple. And the American public, though, has no clue. No clue.
Right, I mean, the same thing applies to the disappearance of John Kennedy.
It does. Yeah. I mean, if anybody watches the Kennedy speech from, I don't know how close it was to his assassination, it was quite close. It's astounding. You can see why he was taken out. He was simply going to challenge.
And he didn't just talk about it. He actually put in motion the plan to make the Federal Reserve irrelevant and take it apart.
And how long did he live? How long did he last?
Yeah, Executive Order 11110 or 11101, trying to remember. That was the one that reinstituted Kennedy's silver certificates to be printed. So that money was going to have a relationship once again with a precious metal.
Right. Those were U.S. notes instead of Federal Reserve notes.
Right. So he effectively took the power away from the Fed.
Yeah, or he thought he overestimated his security based on the little bit of money that he thought he and his family had.
Yeah.
To point out to people how immediate our situation is, and there are certain indicators that are more untarnished. For example, the lie about the quote-unquote improving economy, which is absolutely ridiculous. It's virtually being kept afloat, again, with printed, Fed, fiat money. So there are some indicators that are much more untarnished for true global activity. One of those is the Baltic Dry Index. Headlines today, Baltic Dry drops 9th day in a row, worst quarter in 10 years. If people look at Baltic Dry Index, is all shipping from anywhere to anywhere, anything that goes over the ocean. It's the true unvarnished indicator of economic activity. It's virtually off a cliff. It's not happening. It's not shipping anywhere, going anywhere. You have containers of idle ships, flotillas of idle container ships in the South Seas that are floating because nothing's shipping. This is nothing but a massive facade to try to keep the herd calm till the last minute while they're, in the meantime, spraying the hell out of us. People are getting sick all over. I'm hearing it from people from Southeast Asia to New Zealand, Australia. It's wide open everywhere. And you have now, again, climate issues I think are connected to part of that. There's an El Nino that's surfacing right now that it looks like what the climate engineers did in pointing out that the walls are closing in from every direction from the ecosystem on. But in 2012, it looked like an El Nino was developing. The massive spraying over the eastern Pacific actually appeared to alter the trade winds that pushed that warm water back toward the western Pacific and kept it there, kept it brewing, kept it heating. Now that's boiling up, and I'm pointing out this is like every other aspect of the system. They do anything they can to hide problems until the whole thing blows up in our face, and now it's blowing up from every direction, from economic meltdown, environmental meltdown, climate meltdown, geopolitical meltdown. I mean, you name it, it's coming from every direction. So anybody who thinks that they can hide from this is simply wrong. And the chickens are about home to roost right now. And when you can walk into a forest like what I have here, and you don't hear any frogs, again, you don't see any wildlife, and you can virtually see through the forest. And this is forest that hasn't quite burned up yet. We have forests burning down around the globe as well, and those forests aren't going back. I mean, you can't keep a tree in the forest alive right now that's been there and established, let alone plant a new tree. And this is something that timber companies have to be feeling here. They're certainly have done their best to ignore anything that doesn't affect or benefit their companies. But now, used to be where I live, you could plant saplings in the fall, and they grow on their own. No more. Doesn't happen. When fires burn, you can't plant a sapling and expect it to be alive in the spring. We didn't even get rain till February. In a place where we normally got 8 to 9 months of rain a year, we got 1.5 this year, and it looks like we're done for the year.
Yeah, and there are many reasons that the spraying is going on, one of which is just flat out as a weapon, against Northern California and the rest of California, and it depends on the water, but also
the rest of the world.
Also around the world. I mean, I have friends from different parts of the world, and just this morning I was visited by a man from Iran, a really great person, and he was saying that their country is already being under attack right now. No matter what they do with the bombs and the missiles, they're almost out of water because the spraying has been blocking all of their rain for a long time, and if they didn't have extensive reservoirs, they'd already have died of lack of water. But now even that big reservoir system is almost completely dry, and the whole country will be without water because the storms are being blocked by very obvious spraying from all the incoming moisture.
Well, you've had the president of Iran and the vice president on the floor of the UN at least twice complaining to the world that their country was the victim of weather warfare. And of course, we wouldn't see that anywhere in the news here. In fact, when that happens, what do our spineless elected officials do? They turn their backs and they walk out of the UN building. And I mean, the lack of any sort of honor, again, in our system is astounding. They just toe the line for the collective insanity. And there's no excuse for this anymore. So Iran's not the only country. Again, what do we see? We talked about this in the Philippines when Cyclone Haiyan cut a swath through the Philippines. I said it right after it happened. This is an excuse for U.S. to put their boots on the ground, and that's exactly what they're doing. They're building bases in the Philippines right now. They go in under humanitarian aid pretexts, and they start building bases. That's what's happening. It's in Africa. How many years we've heard about the African droughts and so forth, and it's simply a tool to expand the empire. And now the empire is down to where we don't have any economic basis. We just have a giant military machine. And you can expect the power structure to use that military machine. They're gearing up for it right now. It's the only tool they have left in the toolbox. So we can expect certainly that some sort of conflict is probably coming. And what happened to that jet, by the way? Does anybody wonder about that? You don't have jumbo jets just disappearing. I mean, how safe would people feel, really? How safe would people flying feel if they felt that our plane could just go off the radar, fly for hours, and disappear somewhere, and nobody would ever know what happened? Do you think people really believe that? Richard?
No, I'm not sure what people in general believe, but I've seen two fairly plausible explanations, one of which is that it was a weapons demonstration by the NATO group to counter the Russian and Chinese newly exposed capability with the Topol missile that can take out battleships and other kinds of ships on the surface, and that This is one that can be fired by the surface, ground or ocean to take out airliners, and it's an energy weapon. Now, that may be true. It's from Loren Murray was talking about that, who's a scientist in nuclear technology. And the other possibility is that there was somebody on that plane. There were a lot of very unusual passengers on that plane, many of which came from the U.S. and were patent holders in a new technology that the Carlyle Group inherits if they all died or disappeared. And
anybody know who the Carlyle Group is? You may want to explain that because they might know it's the Bush family, and
yeah.
You know, this is the core group of the cabal investment group. They're into weapons, and you know they seem to be involved in a lot of bad things that happen.
There was apparently one man on that flight that actually managed to hide his cell phone when the plane disappeared, and even though it didn't have any pictures on it, it transmitted GPS data. And if that's true, it looks like the plane was actually taken to the U.S. base on Diego Garcia in the Indian Ocean and is still there. So there's a lot of possibilities, none of which will be addressed at all on the news. And so I just disregard all the theories that are on television because I'm sure that none of them have any relation to what's actually happening.
Well, you know, I like Loren Murray, and I would put considerable stock in whatever she says. And those theories that are posed may very well be true. But the bottom line is this, is for anybody flying an aircraft, they should be damn concerned that they have a media telling them now that this can happen. Planes can just disappear forever. And
the other thing interesting about Loren Murray, who seems to be a well backed up and documented scientist with not beholden to anybody that I know of, and she said it's highly doubtful that it's safe at all to fly commercial airlines anymore, not because of hijacking so much as because they're flying right in a band of circulating Fukushima radiation.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's another aspect, and they're seeing hot particles all over. And we have a direct quote here from Ahmadinejad from Iran, speaking on the floor of the UN, said, accused the West of using special equipment, quote, to prevent rain clouds from reaching regional countries, including Iran. You know, this elephant in the room is so enormous that at this point, again, with the site that Russ is working on and we're all going to try to pull together on, to really shine a light on these people who don't seem to think they're doing anything wrong. And everybody who, if you facilitate a crime, you're guilty. You become an accessory to the crime. And everybody who's helping to hide these programs are accessories to the crime. There's no getting around it. Even the meteorologists on Weather Channel, and I use the term really loosely. God, I'm sure it's evident how much disdain I feel for these quote-unquote meteorologists that are just like talking mannequins, and now they have who's Sam Champion on there, that they get somebody with a nice smile and put a few pretty girls around him, and that's the Weather Channel now because they wouldn't want you to actually think about the weather or why it's so ridiculously wrong. So it's just nothing but theater. But these people are all, if they have credentials and they're supposed to disseminate truth to the public with those credentials, they have a certain journalistic responsibility, and they're absolutely ignoring that. Don't they become accessories to the crime? Don't they? Richard, what do you think about that? I think they are.
I think if they're knowingly taking money to lie at the expense of potentially, human lives, then obviously they would be guilty. But see, that brings up another point that I was just going to raise, and that's that all of the mass atrocities that have been committed over certainly all of the 20th century, where governments have killed outside of war 260 million of their own citizens in various ways. And they're certainly working on that in this century as well. Almost all of those atrocities have been 100% legal. And it brings up a really important point that just because a crime is legal doesn't make it less of a crime. And you've got what we're not supposed to remember. There was an old common law system that I think came from England and other places before that said that it's really simple. Don't hurt anybody. But as long as you do that, live however you want, believe and think and say whatever you want, and just don't trespass on the rights of others and honor your contracts. And that was essentially the basis of the original law that was supposed to have started this country. And that law is still viable. I have seen attempts to use it against government agencies, corporations that are big. They're supposed to be beyond the reach of the law in the usual sense. And I've disregarded most of that because it's never gone anywhere. There've just been great theories and nobody's been able to do it. But now there's a major movement, and everybody should look at itccs.org, where a very brave Catholic priest who got thrown out of the church for bringing up the details that the church shouldn't be murdering school children in Canada, which tens of thousands of their graves are now exposed. And he's successfully bringing common law charges against very high entities that could be applied to geoengineering and other things that we're talking about now when they can't be reached practically with usual law.
I hope, again, it's going to take society and members of society get off their backside and start behaving like responsible people. And, I'm dismayed to say there's not many around. I mean, I have people in my own circle here who, friends, neighbors, whatever label you want to put on them, that I hear this a lot. You need to get away from that computer. You need to lighten up. You need to go out and just have some fun. And you know what? I can't do that. I just can't do it. I mean, when I see the world that my children depend on literally being destroyed in front of my eyes, I can't just go out and do nothing and go see maybe go grab some popcorn and go to a movie or something, and I can't do it. And yet it's like because I can't do it, it somehow bothers people around me. It bothers them because they feel in some way that, and I think it's justifiable. They feel that they're not holding their end up, and I hope they feel damn guilty, because I know a lot of people that I'm sad to say that have not done a damn thing. I'm not expecting everybody to spend 70, 80 hours a week at something like this, but I know so many people who don't do a damn thing, nothing, and it's astounding to me. I mean, what does it take? Even people who claim to care about the environment, claim to know what a healthy tree should look like, and don't seem to recognize the whole forest is imploding. Now, on what's coming this year, I want to comment on something that I think will. This is not a good bit of news, if you will, but there's a silver lining. It will help bring climate engineering to the light of day. This is a direct quote from a website called, people Google Robert Scribbler. His data is quite good. He's a very qualified researcher, and this is a recent article. Monster El Nino emerging from the depths. Nose of a massive Kelvin wave breaks the surface in the eastern Pacific. We're seeing water temperatures there, and this correlates with other data, as much as 12 degrees above normal. Now, it looks like what the climate engineers are going to do next year, unlike this year, they're going to let the moisture flow across the Pacific over California, and they're going to swamp cool the country that way, not with the sort of conveyor they've had set up for this year to create their 26 engineered snowstorms if they complete the alphabet. But what we'll see, as we just saw in California, and we desperately need rain here still, we just had a big system move across us yesterday. Nothing fell. Nothing. All you could hear outside is jet after jet after jet after jet. The sound never went away. You'd think I lived on the end of an LAX runway. It was constant air traffic. And people in the city can't hear this because there's too many noise, I suppose, too much noise. But we see now constant, the undulatus apparatus clouds, these clouds that were named only in 2008. Looks like if you're looking from the ground up, it looks like you're looking at an ocean from above. I mean, it looks like the surface of an ocean only inverted on top of you. And that's, again, from the stratification of the atmosphere. The atmosphere is layering. The ocean is layering, stratifying. This is not healthy. It's wrong. It's unnatural. It causes a lot of problems. But that's part of the way they are able to engineer things. And again, right now, they probably can't keep that from happening. So we see these featureless skies, totally unprecedented cloud types, if you will. Nobody notices. You could light the sky on fire, and a lot of people wouldn't notice. I know you guys are surrounded with that too, correct? I mean, you have people in your circle that just will not get it, no matter what, correct?
Yeah, I sure do. I do find, that some people, when you just tell them to look up and you explain this to them, they begin to catch on right away. The majority of people, though, just don't want to think about it. And I think subconsciously the implications are too scary, because to admit that something like this is really going on subconsciously people realize that this is an admission that there is a complicit faction of the federal government that is willing to do really, really harmful things to the public, and that is just too scary to accept. So people won't even entertain the possibility. I think that's kind of a little piece of the psychology behind it.
It's a natural defense mechanism. I agree.
Exactly, yeah.
But what I would argue is that, again, with what I just mentioned, with what I think is happening with the warm water that's now surfacing out of the ocean that's been kept there, you know, a large degree with the climate engineering, they've helped to allow this buildup to occur, that we're probably going to see an incredibly interesting and alarming year for global weather, global temperatures, and I would argue this is going to make it all but impossible to hide the climate engineering much longer. And that no matter how bad it gets, though, Richard, you're about to comment. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that natural defense mechanism in people is damn strong, isn't it?
Yeah, I understand it, and I have a lot of empathy for it, because I think under the surface, as Russ mentioned, there's incredible amounts of fear. And I think people just feel like they absolutely can't emotionally handle it, and they have to maintain a facade that they have things together, or else everybody that depends on them, you know, will realize that they are incapable of dealing with reality, and that whole scenario they can't get into. So in order to appear like they're still okay, they have to totally deny everything that's actually going on. And I think rather than try to get all of them to radically change their approach and suddenly become courageous and not be afraid, there are a lot of people scattered among the group that do have the courageous approach and are waiting to get the information that will tell them what they can do. And I think as much as possible, we have to, in the interest of using the little time we have left, we have to focus on those people.
You know, I can, from past experiences in the natural world, you don't, when you have a danger facing you like that, you don't tuck tail and run. You don't. That's the most dangerous thing you can do. And I would argue the same is true here. In the case of in the forest, and I've had cougars come close. I mean, walking in one case directly toward my wife and I when we were in the woods. And you know, you don't turn and run from a predator like that. You stand and face them, and that's your best defense. That's your best defense. The same is true with sharks. I was in Fiji with a big Fijian guy, about 6'7", and he brought a bunch of lamb down and got a shark frenzy going while I took pictures. And you know, with the sharks, the same was true too. They come right out, and as soon as you face them, they turn and they go away. Predators are like that. In fact, I saw something even more impressive, a documentary about a guy that got out of a shark cage with two 1,500-pound great white sharks. I mean, I certainly wouldn't get out of a cage with those predators around, but it was astounding that this diver, if he just faced those sharks, they would not approach him, because if you show any sign of being able to defend yourself, it tends to deter that kind of assault. And I would argue the same is true here. If people simply turned and faced this foe that is the collective insanity, that we would prevail if they just got up off their backside and faced their fears instead of trying to deny and run from them. That we would have very different results. I mean, it wouldn't take that much to reach critical mass, would it, Richard? I mean, if we had enough people to really stand up, not forego their golf games, forego their football games, whatever the hell they're doing, stand up and face this before the ship completely goes down.
Yeah, I agree with that. In fact, one of the reasons I agree is because, from what I can tell, the people at the highest levels in charge of all the destructive programs that are going on, not that are working for those people, but the ones designing them, those are the most cowardly people of anybody. And, if they ever had serious opposition, they have to have other people, do their work. They don't have any character or strength really themselves. And so I think that serious opposition and consciousness could make a massive difference in their behavior, for sure.
I'm getting letters now from some activists that are doing exactly that. I mean, very courageous. They've had enough, and they're sending me their dialogues. For example, one that I know will post on the new page that's from a very well-known meteorologist, and you can tell this activist hit a nerve with this meteorologist because he went into great depth and detail trying to defend himself. That he had this very extensive science background. He had a PhD. We've talked about all this on the show before, but he's the authority. He says it's not happening, therefore it's not happening. And this sort of false, supposedly credible but false statements from people like this need to be absolutely exposed. So the kind of activists that are confronting these people head on, I salute them, I encourage them, and we're going to try to give them the tools they need to focus on certain individuals so that we can really badger those that are helping to toe the line. Russ, if anybody calls through, just butt in, by the way.
Sure will.
If anybody on. But the sort of attempt that we saw, I know I saw with ABC in that one interview I did with Chris Edwards, who was the epitome of the sort of spineless, toe the line for the insanity people that we see. His disputing of climate engineering was, one, because he's a military meteorologist and he says it's not happening. Two, he had a friend in the Pentagon who also said it wasn't happening. And three, they did a lab test and they said there was nothing in the test. Well, again, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the labs have all raised their minimum detection levels, so now you can have a lot of metal in your test. It won't even show. It won't even show. How wonderful. So, the whole system is again, been willing to participate in this stuff, but it's up to everybody to figure out how they can move the ball forward every single day. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. The mentality of the people working for the higher power structure is very obedient. They're willing to do or say anything with absolutely no regard to what's true. They just want to say what they need to do to get paid. And you can see it operating all through government and through most of the multinational industries. And in government, for example, that trying to keep clean food, which should be really common sense, not very complicated to figure out. That's a necessary idea. The National Organic Standards Board in this country, in America, is meeting to see how they can dilute the organic standards and allow a lot more toxic and synthetic elements to be classified as organic.
We know now there is no organic, period, anything. There's no organic anything.
Because of what's falling out of the air, yeah, that's right. But they're also talking about intentionally putting in other things as if there's not enough that are poisonous and still leaving the certification. And this does not mean that people shouldn't be buying certified organic food because it's far better than what's not certified. But what it indicates is that the mentality is just make everything as toxic and deadly as you possibly can and collect your paycheck.
Well, I mean, look at everything the human race engages in. Where would you start with the insanity? They're dumping fracking fluids off the California coast. How many animals is that killing? Marine mammals. They're using depleted uranium for practice off the California coast. Fracking. I mean, could you come up with anything more insane than fracking? Let's bore a hole in the ground and pump 500 plus unknown or lethal and many undisclosed chemicals into the ground and see what happens. I mean, it's insanity from top to bottom, and you have people that won't stand up. Now, interesting, when I mail a lot of packages every week, flyers and DVDs to people to try to give them the tools they need to wake others up around them. And I always put, there's a table in the post office, and I always put a few of our flyers where they're visible to all the people that are in line. And it's very interesting, people's behavior. If there's down to a small line, and there's not really any quote-unquote peer pressure by other people around, I'll get those that hope you guys can still hear me okay, because I had some really strange noises on my phone right now.
Yeah, you're clear.
Okay. And what I'll see is people, if there's not a lot of others around them to look at them looking at the flyer, they'll look, and they'll ask questions. What's this about? But if they do that, and anybody in the line starts to give them attention, they immediately put it back, get back in line and pretend they didn't do anything. It's astounding. It's just the training in our society to not stand out from the herd, to go along, is so powerful. It's incredibly powerful. And it's like I shared this demonstration that I saw some weeks back where they, just to go over that again, there was 30 people in a hotel conference room, 29 of which knew this experiment was going on, one who didn't. They pumped smoke into the room. They set the smoke alarms off, and the one who didn't know got up and certainly had every reason to be alarmed, but because nobody else did anything, she sat back down. The whole building could have been burning down. And because nobody else reacted, apparently she would have just sat there. And that's wrong. That's astoundingly wrong when our society's been trained so thoroughly that people now fail to react on their own instincts, their own sense of reason. That mold has to be broken. It has to be broken now. So, I mean, that's a pretty powerful testimony of people's training to conform, isn't it, Richard?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's an immediate, tremendous testament to how successful our system of education is, and also communications such as television. I mean, those things are engineered psychologically to do exactly what you just described, and they're just working really well. And right now, the federal government, the federal government in the U.S. is working on total control of even low-level education now with this new movement towards Common Core, and there are people resisting it, but it's the absolute push from the federal government, which in America is not even allowed to have anything to do with education at all because of the Constitution, and no one seems to know that.
It is off the rails. I'm glad you mentioned Common Core. I mean, I have 2 children, an 8-year-old and a 15-year-old, and the kids don't have time to be a kid anymore. They have homework every single night, weekends. A lot of it doesn't make sense at all. I mean, there's literally things that virtually don't make sense that the teachers send home that you can't find any rational angle for why they would even send that home or ask the child to do something that a third grader, my son's a third grader, and he's supposed to figure things out that make no sense to anybody. And this is part of it. It's part of this sort of training, and I do my best to pull them out of the box. But it's certainly working, obviously, because we have a society of people who are basically dysfunctional and who can't seem to figure out that they're part of a whole, that they have more responsibility than just football games and American Idol. So, but again, those that are working in this cause, there's a lot of incredibly dedicated people now that are I'm very grateful to be connected with on Facebook. Very grateful, and they're all kicking in. And what I would argue for them is, because I'm sure they feel the same things that we all feel. I'm sure that the frustration, I hear about it. They're all feeling the same things. But what I would say in encouragement is keep sowing the seeds, because those that are choosing to ram their heads ever further in the sand are going to have their heads pulled out quick. There's too many things going on now that can't be hidden much longer. And I would also encourage everybody out there to keep plenty of beans and rice, and I'm not kidding, in your cupboard, because when things come down, it's likely that it will come very, very quickly, and you might not have time to stock up with provisions at that point. You can only stock up so much, but I would certainly encourage people to do that, and you can get a lot of calories pretty inexpensively with those two elements, beans and rice, and you can store them in Mylar bags. In fact, those can be bought on Amazon. There's YouTube tutorials to show you how to use those bags. You can seal up your own food. You guys ever tried that?
Yeah, giving it a try. You can get a sealer. You can seal up bags, keep them for a long time.
You can do it at home with a clothes iron. You can do it with a normal clothes iron at home with a Mylar bag if you do it right.
Sure, absolutely.
A shop vac. You can suck the air out with a shop vac and seal it up. I know it's hard to think along these terms, but the more provision people have taken to sustain themselves for whatever's coming, so the more they can contribute back to the fight for the common good. Again, it's not about just digging in and crawling into a hole where you're not doing any good for anybody, but the more solid ground each of us are on that are trying to engage in this battle, then the more we can focus on continuing in that battle of raising awareness instead of having to figure out where the next bite's coming from. And so that's the reason I argue it. If the only purpose in life was to keep our heart beating as long as possible and just provide for our own sustenance, and there wouldn't be much point to that. But if we're able to be on more solid ground so we can help those around us and continue to engage in putting the truth out, well, then it matters.
One thing I'd also mention, Dane, is that to get people motivated, it's always good to talk about a solution, I think, and let's make associations with people about their illnesses in the spraying. Now, because I can smell and taste the stuff, I can tell you that people's behavior changes, children's behavior changes, and that there are long-term health effects to breathing these toxic metals, and I believe there are other chemicals in there as well. Many people have attested to smelling things that smell like acetone and sulfur and burnt rubber and plastic over many miles, periods of many miles after on a spray day. These things are very toxic. I've had aneurysms. I know people have had aneurysms, strokes, cancer, heart attacks. These are 4 of the most common things that I have seen associated with heavy spraying. But we need to show people that breathing this stuff definitely shortens your life and causes many other ailments. And so people need to be aware of that. I think it's a great way to introduce people to this subject who have a little bit of an open mind.
Well, I've heard from others, Russ, that have the same sense that you do. So I agree it's there. I've certainly tasted a metallic type taste in my throat before. Also, seeing rain tests change. Just talked to a very articulate activist today. I'm not sure if he wants me to mention his name or not, but great guy, has just done a rain test, did it very appropriately. Very high levels of sulfur in his test. So on any given day, and I don't think I've seen a sulfur count that high before, and some of the metal counts were low. But on any given day, as you've expressed, Russ, you seem to sense different mixes, and that appears to be borne out with the tests. We're seeing that.
Absolutely. I think, yeah, go ahead.
No, well, I'm just saying it, depending on what they're trying to do, whatever storm system that they're trying to affect, whether it's to migrate the rain further or to try to nucleate the rain and have it come down, certainly there's bound to be very different mixes. We're seeing that in the water test. That would correlate with what you say you sense. Yeah,
I did a water test in Maine, rainwater test, 600 micrograms per liter, of aluminum. We had a dust test where we had very high sodium, very high calcium, mercury. Very interesting things coming up. I know George did a test recently on the show a couple of weeks ago when he was on. He said they're finding very high levels of mercury in his tests. And I will tell you, as someone who can smell and taste it, that I've identified 10 separate mixes now. There are 10 separate things, tastes and odors that will occur over very large areas that are associated with the spraying campaign. So I believe there's a wide variety of things that they're using.
Well, yeah, there is, and we're seeing again the fallout to the environment. I've talked about before certain statistical facts. We're losing 200 species a day, plant and animal. 70 to 80% of that is fungally related. We know that when these bioavailable elements kill the natural microbes, fungus moves in. Let me read another headline right now. This is new today. Bananageddon, quote, millions face hunger as deadly fungus decimates global banana crop. Scientists have warned that the world's banana crop, worth $26 billion and a crucial part of the diet for more than 400 million people, is facing, quote, disaster from virulent diseases immune to pesticides or other forms of control. Alarm at the most potent threat, a fungus known as Panama disease, has risen dramatically after it was announced in recent weeks. It has jumped from Southeast Asia, where it has already devastated export crops, to Mozambique and Jordan. You have, again, all over the globe, you have crops beginning to fail. Why would we be surprised at that? I mean, the fact that they're changing photosynthesis, we don't even know the effect on plants from the altered light wavelength form due to the light scattering nature of these particulates in the atmosphere. We don't even know. There's no studies on this. But certainly it can't be good. I mean, photosynthesis in a plant is nothing short of a miracle. It's miraculous. And yet it's not even considered by people. Take everything for granted. They take the veil thin layer of atmosphere that allows us to live on this planet completely for granted. And so right now, though, this is one of the issues that I'm talking about that I think will make it, by the end of this year, probably difficult, if not impossible, to hide what's going on many fronts, and including in our skies. And I would argue that that's going to make the power structure likely to do something radical soon. So And we see the food's also poisoned. I mean, so we were losing bananas, engineered fish, which is now mostly the fish you buy is genetically engineered, it's farmed, and it's extremely toxic. People should look at that food as well. So, avoid that food. We have the bee die-off occurring there. In some places, they lost 100% of their hives. And again, from every angle, the single greatest environmentally destructive factor of all is really and arguably the climate engineering. And although there's so many other valid issues, I hope people learn to focus on one. If they come to the same conclusions that we've come to, that we do talk about other issues because they're related, but the bottom line is this one issue. If we could bring it to light, I think it would drag everything else with it. People would realize just how critical our situation is, and that, again, Junior's autism and Granny's Alzheimer's came from these programs. I think we have a population that was ready to hunt down and put on trial anybody and everybody involved with these programs. That's what needs to happen.
Dane, there's a question on the forum. Somebody's asking who is organizing these programs.
How would we answer that when we know there's so many people involved? That would be a very long answer. We know we have Russia involved, China involved, NATO countries involved. Anybody who doesn't want to be involved gets squashed. We saw that there was some resistance that we saw from Ireland. Their economy was immediately collapsed. Anybody who doesn't want to participate is somehow squashed. So I don't know that we could name all the entities. U.S. Department of Defense, NATO, the global cabal, which involves the power structure of Rothschilds, Rockefeller. I mean, there would be so many entities that you couldn't pin them down to one thing. And we know from documents from, in fact, the one I found on the NASA archive from the 60s on these programs, you had 10 federal agencies, Department of Defense, Department of Interior, Department of Energy, and so on. You had 12 major universities. Wow, where would we start? And this ought to be a testimony to just how moralist our society's become, that all these agencies, all these employees participate in this and tell themselves they're not doing anything wrong. So I don't know how we would answer that, other than there's a hell of a lot of people involved, and none of them with any sense of morality. So
and part of the problem is that our governments are shaped like pyramids. You have so much power at the top. Of course, the massive executive branch and all these state departments like the IRS and Homeland Security and on and on and on, which has become the huge overweight branch of government, is all done under executive privilege based on emergency powers, which the United States has been in a perpetual state of emergency. And that state of emergency is renewed every year, and you can go into the U.S. code and see this, and every president does it. So,
and the climate is considered an emergency. I mean, this is a national security issue. That's why they can do whatever they want. I want to finish, Russ, I know we don't have much time left. No matter how hopeless it looks in trying to wake other people up, I would argue they won't have a choice for long. We all need to pull together, and no matter how much resistance we get, effectively stay at this task. Flyers or other credible information. Use the flaming arrow links for example, on GeoEngineeringWatch.org. I think Russ might have you have activist suggestions up as well. Look at those suggestions. Learn a little bit about what you're dealing with here, so you're not completely shooting from the hip. And again, for people in the anti-geoengineering community, it's up to us to learn what the bigger picture is, so that we disseminate accurate data. Period. If we don't look and we don't continue to learn, we're just like the people who refuse to look at climate engineering because they've been taught by NASA or some other government official that it's not happening, and they don't look at any more data. We're just like them. If we don't continue to look, learn, challenge our beliefs, challenge our preconceptions, and try to constantly update our perspective and our data, then we fall in the same category as those we criticize for not looking at these programs.
That's right. Somebody on the forum is mentioning organizing something for Earth Day, thinking this would be a very good opportunity to expose geoengineering. So that's something we can all think about. This is GeoEngineering Watch Radio. We're here every Saturday at 12 noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. Eastern time. On behalf of Richard Sachs and Dane Wigington, this is Russ Tanner. Come see us next week at ucy.tv. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.